Hey, how's it going, folks? This is Hellbent, and today I'm going to release an early alpha version of my new um, bitmap maker. Uh, you, some of you might have already seen the two videos I released over the last couple of days that did a little demonstration of it, and many of you probably a little bit confused about exactly what it is. So I assume that many of you that seen the video are probably under the impression that it's meant to be a replacement for a program like MS Paint or something like that, a paint program. That's not at all what this program is for. Um, what this program actually is for, although this can be used for that, like you can replace MS Paint because you can save images as a PNG, and I'll go into that in a little bit, but you can save PNGs and everything from this. But what this actually is a code generator. So if you've ever worked with the Gdip before and tried to draw stuff with it, you know it's function call after function call after function call. It's create a brush, draw something with that brush, delete that brush, create another brush, draw something with that brush, delete that brush, create a pen, clone a brush from that pen, draw something with it. So the more things that you have, the more functions you're going to have to use, and your code gets out of control really quickly. So you can end up easily, for just a nice drawing that you can do with Gdip, you might have hundreds of lines of function calls just to draw something. So this is a way for you to actually draw it in real time, see what the changes are, and then when you're done, you export to a file, and in that file it has a function, a pre-made function with every single function call that you would need to reproduce that in a GUI. So let me show you, before I go into how to work everything in here, let me go and show you this little demo that I created. So I've created a script, set it to single instance force, I've set the batch lines to zeros. I created an object that I'm going to use, that I use in a function call that I've created it's just a wrapper function for a bunch of the different Gdip functions. So this basically just sets up a layered window for me, all in one function call rather than having multiple function calls. In this script at the bottom, most of the code in this is the Gdip library. At the top of the Gdip library is the functions that I've created. So if you want to reproduce, if you're new to Gdip and you want to do it exactly like I have here with this layered window. Now I'm going to be using a layered window, but for the most part, many of you are probably going to want to use BitBelt or BIT, BLT. If you go to my scripts section, there's a list. If you're not familiar, there's a script in the script section of my homepage called Gdip function tool or something like that, and this lists all the functions that are in the standard library. And the second thing on the list is BitBelt. So you'll want to use this to actually draw directly onto onto the DC. That's actually what the bitmap maker uses to create new bitmaps. So the background is all black in here, and I'll get into what this means for when you create a function later on, but basically you would use the same idea for drawing directly onto a GUI. So you just create a normal GUI, initiate Gdip, start it up, use BitBelt to transfer the graphics from the function that this program creates, and you just put it onto it. And then you can add buttons and everything else. In this case, I'm using a layered window, which you can't use a lot of the different kind of GUI controls because they're invisible. You can use triggers though, which is what I'm using for this one. So let's go back to the demo. So I've done the layered window setup, which just sets up a layered window for me, and then I'm making a call to the function that I created through the bitmap maker. Here's the function right here. So this is what I was talking about. This is a very simple bitmap that I've created, but you can see that it's dozens of lines of creating brushes, drawing stuff with the brushes, deleting the brushes, creating new brushes, adding text, everything like that. And it's very easy to get lost in this code. And it's very annoying trying to make small little tweaks to the X and Y positions of things by using this code, because you'd have to make a little change, run it, check it out, close it, make a little change, run it, right? So this thing, the Bitmap Maker, eliminates that completely. So this is the code that was generated through the Bitmap Maker, and it comes with this standard generic name of a function, which you can rename as soon as it pops it out. So you just change this to whatever you want, and then you make a call to that function, attach it to a variable so that it gets the pointer to it, and then you use that pointer. In my case, I'm going to be using that pointer to draw image to the graphics that I'm using. If you're not familiar with this stuff, just look up how to use Gdip and everything like that. But anyways, I'm drawing that bitmap I created onto my layered window, and then I'm going to display that. I've also added a couple of text controls to use as triggers. So one of the text controls that you can't see, there's nothing you can see with them, but you can interact with them. One of them is going to allow me to click and drag and move around the window, and the other one is attached to GUI close, which will exit the script. So let me go ahead and run it, and I'll point out one thing right away. So with it being in a bitmap, if you're going to use a layered window like this, if you have a case where if the bitmap you're making has rounded edges or angled edges, you're not going to want to use it directly as a bitmap. So if this was if my bitmap was a rectangle and then I had rounded surfaces inside of that rectangle, no problem, I can keep it in the function. But if I'm gonna have it like this, where I have transparent areas of the window and I'm using rounded shapes for my window to define the edges of my window, what I'm gonna want to do is go into the function and change it from creating a bitmap to it just drawing directly to the graphics for my layered window. And I've already set that up. So I don't know if you can see it, but if you look at Pac-Man, he looks pretty jagged. And this is because, let me see if I can describe this the best way. It's using anti-aliasing, and it's trying to do anti-aliasing with things that don't exist. So he ends up with getting these jagged edges. So to make smooth edges, like I said, you just take it away from being in the bitmap. So this is the first things that it does in the function that you get created, is it creates the bitmap, creates the graphics for the bitmap, and sets the smoothing mode. What you want to do is get rid of this, and then take all this other stuff, and instead of drawing it, in my case, I'm going to be drawing it to the graphics of this window. So this function here, it returns an object, and one of the keys for this object is windows.g. So I'm going to draw directly to the graphics for this window, and I've already set that up down below. So I'm going to comment this out, and you'll see it's a really big difference. Alright, so I'm going to turn this one back on. So all I've done with this is I've taken it and I've taken out those first couple of lines where I'm creating a bitmap, doing the graphics, setting the smoothing mode. I've gotten rid of that, and then every time I've seen this G, because I have this is the G, the graphics that I'm using is part of this window object, so it's going to be window.g. I just replace G with window.g. So that's what I've done. I've removed those 3 lines, and then every time I see that letter G, I've added window.g. And that's it. So now if I run this, let me see if I have all the code that I need commented out. Here, what I should have done was actually this, so that way I can comment it out back afterwards. So now if I run this, you're going to notice that I don't have that jagged edge anymore. It's nice, crisp, smooth lines and everything. So this is an example of something that I made just a few minutes ago using the Bitmap Maker. So let's go into the Bitmap Maker and see how to actually use it. Oh darn! Suffering from a little bit of a cold right now. Okay, so there's a first thing I'm gonna mention is that right now it's written for 96 DPI. So if you're using 120 DPI, some of the controls are going to be, the text for the controls is going to be a little bit big. I'll show you, I have a picture somewhere, I'll show it. Let me see if I can find that actually. Oh yeah, I was looking up what is GDIP just in case anyone wants to know. It's GDIP stands for Graphic Display Interface Plus. So if you're wondering what GDIP is, let me see. So here is an example. Oops, I gotta minimize this. Here's an example. This is what it looks like on my screen, and if you have a 96 DPI, this is what it's going to look like. The buttons all look lined up. The word down fits into a single button, but if you have 120 DPI or over than that, you're going to get things like this, where the down button now, the text is a little bit messed up. The controls here, where I have the hide element and then the notes, that's completely blocked by this. So for the most part, it is usable right now for if you have if you're using like 125% sized up, or your text is sized up or whatever. I'm gonna, sooner or later down the road, I am gonna try to make it so that way if you have higher DPIs, everything will look exactly the way it should. But for right now, if you have 96 DPI, all the controls look beautiful. If you have 120 DPI, you're going to have some issues with some of the controls. It is still usable though. So I just wanted to point that out. So if you got 120 or higher, you're shit out of luck. Let's go into the bitmap maker. So this is what it looks like if you have, the size of it is 1360 pixels by 700 pixels. That's the size of pretty much the exact size of my laptop here. Okay, so let's go into it. The first thing, let's just go ahead and create a bitmap. To create a new bitmap, right now, you do not, sooner or later, I'm going to make it so that way you can name the bitmaps and change all these kind of things about it. But for right now, because of the way I have it drawn, because I just want it to get this a working prototype done, before I start investing the time and trying to refactor everything. Right now, it automatically names the bitmap. So when you create a new bitmap, just pick a position within this window. X and Y, you can just leave it as default. And then width and a height that you want to make your bitmap. So I'm going to leave it as its current defaults. And this gives me this. So it has a width of 250 and a height of 300. The function itself, it's only going to contain what I actually draw onto this bitmap. So even though I see a black square here right now, when I'm done, the bitmap is going to be that size, but it's only going to actually display the things that I draw. So for example, let's say I want to add something black on this right now, right away. The first thing I'll do is I'll add a rectangle, and I'll just make the rectangle whatever color I want, and then I will fill up. I'll go into the controls that I'm using in a few minutes, but I'll make it this size, and then I'll change the color to whatever I want. So if I want it to be the background color, no problem. So now I can start drawing something black onto that right away. 0, 0. And then just before I save my code, all I have to do is go up to that rectangle that contains that shape on it, unlock, and remove it. And now that rectangle that I had drawn isn't going to get shown. Okay, so let's start from scratch again. I have the size of the bitmap I want to create. I set the smoothing, and then I add that bitmap. Now, if I click on the bitmap, I can drag it around and move it around. Sometimes I might want to have more than one bitmap going at a time, so what I can do is I can stick it off to the side. And these panels right here, if I right click on them, they'll retract. If I right click it again, it'll expand back out again. Okay. Right now, just so that way I can get the off out, you you only can save one bitmap at a time. And you can't load bitmaps. So within a week, probably within a week, after you finish creating a bitmap and saved it, you can actually reload it the next time you come and use this program again. So right now, every time you want to create a bitmap, you have to do it in one sitting. If you don't do it all in one sitting, as soon as you close it, you're not going to be able to load it back in yet. Within a week, I should have the code to save the variables and then load them in, and you can select whatever bitmaps. So right now, you can only save one bitmap. I'll go into that in a minute. I'm confusing myself now. So let me just draw something. So I'm going to add a rectangle. With these don't work right now. These don't work for every control. Like, for example, a rectangle has a XY width and height. So the Y2 and X2 don't do anything, but the Y and X do something. So to use these, if you just press the button, it'll move by 1 pixel at a time. If you hold Shift and press the button, it'll move 10 at a time. You can also come over here and manually enter in whatever you want. I forgot to add the notes, so the notes aren't incorporated right now, but I'll add that in with the next update as well. So the notes, what it would do is, in that code, in between each line, you could add a little notes about what that particular bit of code is going to be doing. So it'll make it a little bit easier for you to trace things down later on. So I'm going to add a rectangle there. There is 2 control types right now, or 2 element types that aren't incorporated, and it's because I want to redesign this to do them properly. And that is draw lines, which is you can draw multiple points. So you start at an XY position, and then you add another XY position and another XY position, and you can add hundreds of points to draw a line or fill a line, whatever. And the other one is fill polygon. So one is to draw the lines, the other one is to fill the lines. So you can draw shapes and everything. So those 2 aren't incorporated. It's the only 2 that aren't incorporated yet, and it's just because it would be too much of a pain in the butt to sit here typing out 10, 23, 23, 99, right? So I haven't added that in. I'm going to make it so that way it's very easy to add those in. You can use your cursor and everything like that. That's another thing. Right now you can't use your cursor to move the shape. You can do it to move the bitmap, but in the next update or the update after that, I'll make it so that way you can use your cursor to actually draw where you want, and that'll make, then you just fill out the area that you want, and then you can use these to fine tune where you actually want it to be. So I've created a rectangle. I'm going to do a rounded rectangle. I'll make the radius of the corners 15. Alright, I'll change the color hatch. There is 52 different hatch styles you can use between, I think is it 0? Yeah, between 0 and 52. So 53 styles. You can change the color. I've added it so that way you just have to, if you want to, you can just press get, select a color that you already have somewhere on your screen or something, and then change it. Or you can use my color picker, which is available on my channel, and you can do get with that and whatever. But that is hatch. Then there's line brush. Line brush is you pick an X point, X and Y starting point, and a X2, Y2 ending point. So you can do from, let's say, here to here, or from here to here, and then wrap mode, I don't know, you can look up, you can just try it, see what the wrap mode does. It goes between, pretty much between, I think it's 0 and 4, or 0 and 3. 4, for some reason, I don't know, it's listed as part of the function, but it does nothing. It gives me a black shape. I don't know what it's supposed to do, but it doesn't do anything. So anyways, there's that line brush, and then there's gradient. So gradient is the same as the line brush, except this is using a rectangle. So it has an XY width and height. So it's basically, if I want to do a gradient going from the top to the bottom, let me see. So I'll do I don't know. Let me see. 50, 50. I'll make this a little bit higher. And then there's the gradient mode. So this one, the linear gradient mode, it changes the direction. So if I want it to be up and down, it's 0. If I want it to be left, right, it's 1. If it's 2 is on an angle that way, and 3 is on an angle that way. I don't know. You can't probably see that. So let me get another color. There, you can probably see that now. So that's 3. That's 2. Just play around with it. That's all I have to do. That's what I have to do. There's no textbook that teaches you this stuff. You have to figure it out. Rounded rectangle, add a circle. Circle is actually ellipse, but I prefer the word circle. I do whatever I want. Pi is pi. Get a starting angle and a sweep angle. So this is a little bit confusing. Just play around with the values. You can go into negative numbers, just so you know. You can go negative 90, let's say, for example, and that'll be at what you expect to be 90, working in reverse. Now, if you go actual 90, it's what you would expect to be 270. Is that it? Let me see. Yeah, it's where you'd expect to be 270. So the actual 90 is 270, and negative 90 is where you'd actually expect it to be regular 90, except now you go backwards. I don't know. Play around with it. That's what I have to do. I have to play around with it until I get what I want. You can also do Bezier. You can hide any element that you want. So if I'm working on something and I need to see what's behind it or whatever, I can just hide the elements. Hiding the elements, even if everything's hidden, when I go and generate my code, it's still going to generate those hidden items. So I'll draw a Bezier. This is basically you have a start point of the line and end point of the line, and then you have 2 points along somewhere in the middle of it that sort of like curve it. If you don't know what it is, just play around with some values and you'll figure it out. Line is, I think, the only one besides Bezier that actually uses the second one here. So let me add a line, and so I can do this. The end point is the x2, y2, and the start point is the x1 and y1. Change the thickness of the line, change it to a hatch brush, change it to a line brush, gradient brush, whatever. So now that I have a drawing that I want to use, and remember it's going to actually show these, so might as well show them. I have two options. I can save it as a text, as code. I can save it as code, or I can save it as a PNG. So each of these, I can only have one instance of them at a time. So if I want to actually, if I'm creating bitmaps, if I'm creating a bunch of bitmaps, what I would do is I'd save the code and then go into the folder, copy that text file, and put it somewhere else. And then I can go back in, save the next bitmap, go back into the folder, copy that text file, move it somewhere else, or rename it. You just have to actually rename it, because it's going to rename. It's just going to override the text file that has the same name. But I'm going to save. I'm going to save as a PNG. Oh yes. If you minimize the window, it will make the bitmaps disappear like that. You can either just move an element, select an element, and move it 1 pixel, or just select. Actually, I guess you can just select it. Let me see. That's a good. There we go. So just select an element, and it'll redraw it. You can also do auto draw on or off. So auto draw is as I make changes, it automatically updates. If you don't want that, I don't know why you wouldn't want that, but you can turn it off and then manually draw whenever you want. But the whole point is to be able to actually see what you're doing. So I don't know why you'd want to turn it off, but I put it as an option. So save it as a PNG, and now if I go into that folder, there's a PNG called test saved PNG, and if I run that, I get what we just drew. And like I said, that black area is gone. It doesn't actually exist. It's only what I draw onto that. So that's that. And then let's do save it as code. So if I want to take this, I'm going to get rid of okay, let's say I'm working on these two bitmaps and I want to switch from working on this one to now working on this one. What I do is I select the bitmap that I want to work on, select it, and then activate it. And now it'll give me a list of everything that's on that. So I'm going to draw a line on that. If I want to go back to doing this one, I come in here, select it, activate it, and it gives me my list of things that are on this bitmap. So I can have 20 bitmaps going one time if I want. Alright, so let's say I'm going to get rid of this bitmap. So I'm going to select it, activate it, and remove it. Okay, now I'm gonna copy the code for this so that way I can draw this into my layered window. So I'm gonna hit Save Bitmap Code, minimize. I'm gonna go into my folder, and right now, like I said, there's only one file. So if I want to, I can say and now I can go back into the program and save my next bitmap. So this is the code that it generated, and if you open this text file up, you get this, which is it creates a function, gets a pointer to a bitmap that you're going to create with the size, gets the graphics for the bitmap, smoothing, and then all the functions, and then it deletes the graphics and returns the bitmap. So I'm going to take this, and I am going to go to my demo script, which has already been set up for me, and I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to paste that code in. So HB bitmap, I'm already expecting the HB bitmap maker function, so I don't need to rename it. I'm only using one function right now, so I don't need to rename it. Run it, and that's site doing its thing. And there we go. Oh, this is because I accidentally didn't use the proper dimensions. What did I have? What was that? 250 by 300? I think that's the default. There we go. So like I said, it's got jagged edges, and that's because I'm drawing it as the bitmap there. So instead, I'm just going to get rid of that, get rid of this, get rid of this, and I think I'm going to turn this off, and then I'm good. Now I shouldn't have any sharp edges. Let me see. I missed something probably. I'm going to comment this. Let me see. What did I miss? Bitmap Maker demo. Oh yes, I forgot. I have to add the graphics. So window. Come in here. Window.g. This is just my case for the object that I'm using. Windows.g. 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 Windows. There we go. And now there we go. So now I have nice smooth edges. Well, that is it. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. If you are familiar with working with Gdip and you'd like to see some features, I probably already have them in mind, but go ahead and leave a comment about it. And if it's not something that I had thought of already, and if I like the idea, I'll definitely add it in the future updates. But we're up to like probably 2 hours long now. But yeah, I hope you enjoy. Happy creating.